It seems like every week on social media there are some idiots accusing Satanists of being Nazi fascists. Other times it's the exact opposite, with other idiots accusing Satanists of being Jewish Zionists. They can't both be right, but they can both be wrong. And they are. The Fascism Question and related topics in part 1 of this multi-part episode of Satansplain.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain. Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Happy belated Walpurgisnacht and happy belated 3rd anniversary to Satansplain. Magister Bill M here with episode number 88 of Satansplain. For those of you who don't know, it seems that the number 88 is a code used by neo-Nazis. H being the 8th letter of the alphabet, so 88 becomes HH, which is short for Heil Hitler. No, I'm not saying all this to spread some kind of neo-Nazi message, but just as sex was a topic, I wanted episode number 69 as an amusing excuse to do that. I figured I would use 88 to talk about the many idiots out there who accuse us Satanists of being neo-Nazis or fascists or what have you. Though, as I mentioned at the very start of the episode, we Satanists also receive accusations of the complete opposite extreme. That is, we occasionally get neo-Nazis who accuse us Satanists of being part of some evil Zionist Jewish cabal. So, what the hell is going on with all of this? Well, let me first give you a quick summary of what I'm going to talk about in this episode. Both of these two extreme accusations I just mentioned are simply incorrect. In fact, I'm sure some of you listeners out there who already know the basics of Satanism may be asking, Bill, why even address this on Satansplain? It's a waste of time. Well, I understand that sentiment, but as with all the other topics we cover on Satansplain, I think there's a lot we can talk about still. So I am going to first talk more generally about why I don't think that what I do is a waste of time. Next, I will argue that both extremes, the people calling us Nazis and the people calling us Zionist Jews, ironically have a lot in common, namely in their thinking process. Or perhaps lack of thinking, more accurately. I'm also going to be spending a lot of time on that. In fact, most of this episode will be about that before I actually get into some more specific accusations we get. And finally, I hope to dig a little deeper beyond the low-information accusatory lines we hear and see where the differences between Satanism and these other ideologies truly lie. Two particular essays I'd like to cite for this are The Fascism Question by Church of Satan High Priest Peter H. Gilmore, and an essay on Satanism and Racialism from Magister Matt G. Paradise. Some of that, however, I won't be getting to until the next episode, like I said. In fact, this may even end up being a 3-parter. We'll see. But that is the summary of what I have planned. As always, you should find some chapter breaks, the timestamps in the full description of this episode if you want to skip around. Let's begin. Before I go any further, I want to make a disclaimer. I know that there are people out there who will never listen to reason, people who simply do not have the mental skills to have rational discussion, or possess critical thinking, or to have an objective conversation on almost anything. And this is why I disable comments on YouTube. I'm not here to host message boards for idiots who see a video title, don't even click play, and jump straight to the comment section to say whatever ignorant shit they feel compelled to say, without any thought, as if this is all about them. Now, I do get lots of good feedback from people who do actually listen to the show. Maybe they comment on a post of mine on Facebook or on X or Locals, or send me an email directly. I'm fine with keeping those lines of communication open. But for whatever reason, YouTube comments just seem to attract more of a cesspool, at least in my experience. Anyway, getting back to my point, I accept the fact that no matter what I say in this episode or in other Satansplain episodes, there will always be zealots of one type or another that remain unconvinced. In fact, maybe you've run into this same sort of thing with a fanatical Christian, for example, who tries to argue with you. Or maybe you see it online in political discussions where the exchange gets pretty heavy and vicious. Now, do these arguments ever end with one person saying, "Oh, okay, I see I was wrong. You are right. You win the argument"? No, that rarely ever happens. Now, I know some people will take what I just said and say, "Well, Bill, you shouldn't argue with Christians or debate anybody else for that matter, because people aren't going to change their minds and therefore you're just wasting your time. In fact, you're giving your opponent attention, which is what they want. It's their whole reason for debating you. So really, Bill, you're only indulging the enemy. You should just ignore them." Well, I understand that sentiment, but I don't really agree with it. I think debates like this can be worth it, at least some of the time. And I give the following 4 reasons. 1, I think it can be fun. Some of us enjoy the art of debate. I like being analytical and systematically breaking down arguments to their premises and seeing where the flaws might be. I like being able to spot logical fallacies. At the same time, you have the challenge of trying to deliver what you want to say and doing it effectively. So there's the challenge of crafting your own response for maximum effectiveness. A second reason you may want to debate somebody is that you might learn something in the process. For example, I used to have tons and tons of debates with biblical creationists, people who claim evolution is false and that the universe is only 6,000 years old and Adam and Eve was a literal story and all that crap. And I don't kid myself into thinking I changed many, if any, of their minds. But, in learning how to counter their creationist arguments, I myself ended up learning a lot about biology. In fact, getting into debates may help you learn something about yourself. Your opponent may pose a question that makes you think, okay, he asked me why I believe this thing that I said. That's actually a good question. Let me think about why that is. And, form a response. Also, like almost any skill, I think debate is something that you can improve on with practice. Sometimes the same debate questions come up over and over again, whatever the subject is. And with practice, you can sharpen your responses to those questions. A lot of the essays I myself have written, as well as past episodes of Satansplain, all started out from some bad argument or misconception I kept seeing other people have. And in replying to that, every single time it showed up, I was able to get a response that I kept refining and refining. Not to mention that whether you're a Satanist or not, I think you should be able to articulate to another person what it is that you believe and know how to stand by your convictions. Because we've seen YouTube clips, for example, of people at a protest, regardless of the political party or the reason for being there, and somebody will come up to them with a camera and ask them a couple of basic questions, and it seems like they really don't know why they're there. They didn't really think it through. Now, maybe that's a lot of selective editing that, the filmers do, but still quite telling. So to quickly recap, 1, debate can be fun. 2, it can be a learning experience. 3, it's good practice. Again, I wouldn't have Satanism essays or Satansplain episodes or the ability to get a point across if I never engaged in challenges. Which brings me to the 4th and final reason why debate can be worth it, and that is the audience. Even if you're not going to successfully change the mind of the person you're debating, you may very well change the mind of an onlooker. When you're debating somebody online, or maybe on a radio show or a television show, again, regardless of whether it's Satanism or some other topic, there is usually an audience in these cases, and people in the audience who are seeing this debate may benefit from that. Sometimes when 2 people are in an intense debate, where they take opposite sides of a topic, there may be an onlooker who was on the fence about the topic or just didn't know much at all about it. And their takeaway may be, well, after listening to these two people debate each other, it seems like the first guy really had solid sounding arguments, whereas the second guy just seemed to be a lunatic posting Bible verses and calling the other person a sinner. And he types in all caps, and he keeps trying to change the subject and dodge questions. So yeah, I think the first guy seems correct, and the second guy, well, he seems full of shit. Now, as I've said many times before, Satanism is not looking for mass approval. That should be obvious with the chosen name of our religion, which just goes to show how stupid and ridiculous these people are who try their best to social shame Satanists. But more on that later. Regardless, as a Satanist, I do believe in correcting misinformation because even though this is not a religion for everybody, we do care about our own self-preservation, and we also prefer that there be accurate information available for the few people in the world that this is the right religion for. Well, that was more than enough of a disclaimer. Let's get back to examining these sorts of people, namely the ones who seem fixated on accusing the Church of Satan of being Nazis or fascists, and their exact opposites, the one who accuse the Church of Satan of being Zionist Jews, or even sometimes just Jews. Now, I know there are people out there who would say, but Bill, I'm a Satanist, and I'm even a member of the Church of Satan, and I do consider myself an anti-fascist, because there are real fascists out there, and I think they're a problem. Or maybe for that matter, you say, Bill, I'm a Satanist, and I'm a member of the Church of Satan even, and I consider myself an anti-Zionist, because I believe there are real Zionists in the world, and they're a problem, and I'm against Israel for this list of political reasons. Yeah, I get all that. I do. If either of those sentiments describe you, then you should note that this episode isn't directed at you particularly. If you're not one of these people who are so consumed by a boogeyman that you see it everywhere, then rest assured, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about other people. Likewise, maybe you aren't a Satanist, but you are a self-described anti-fascist or even a self-described racialist or white nationalist or something along those lines. But you do have enough of a rational mind to have done your homework. You've read the Satanic Bible, for example, or read some of our other literature firsthand, or listened to interviews from actual Church of Satan members. And you think, okay, I get what you Satanists are about. You're not a bunch of goat-knifing devil worshippers like you see in the horror movies. You guys are basically atheist Epicureans who take Satan as a metaphor for things like carnal nature and nonconformity. I mean, I still disagree with your beliefs, but whatever. I know you're not a bunch of goat-knifing devil worshippers. And frankly, I think there are far more bigger problems in the world than to spend time harassing you on social media, because there is a problem I see in the world, and, well, it's not Satanism. Okay, so if that's you, then it sounds like you're not some kind of knee-jerk paranoid type who's afraid to read stuff outside of your comfort zone, even if other people might call you that, and I might vehemently reject your beliefs for other reasons. But in any case, yeah, this episode isn't about you either. So again, the people I do want to talk about are the people who are really, really obsessed with Nazis or Jews to such an absurd degree that they throw logic out the window, make it into a witch hunt, and include the Church of Satan, or even Satanism in general, as being in line with their boogeyman of choice. And ironically, these two groups of accusers have a lot in common if you look under the surface. For the sake of simplicity, let's call these accusers Group A and Group B. So Group A are the people constantly calling the Church of Satan Nazi fascists, and Group B are the people constantly calling the Church of Satan Zionist Jews, or again, just Jews. In fact, if it helps to remember who is who, just remember that the word Antifa starts with the letter A. And as for the letter B, well, I was going to say Breitbart starts with B, but yeah, that's a little too cruel. We'll say brown shirts. Yeah, brown shirts start with B. So that's just a mnemonic for you, A and B, who periodically show up to harass Church of Satan members in one of those two ways I mentioned. So there's a certain paranoia I see in both groups A and B regarding their enemy of choice. Now, this is not to say that their declared enemies don't exist at all, or that the number of those enemies causing problems in the world is zero. Group A says they are fighting fascist Nazis. Are there actual neo-Nazis in the world? Are there actual people who would politically call themselves fascists? Two and or one or the other? Oh yeah, they exist. Germany's Third Reich may be long gone, but there do exist certain people, whether you call them neo-Nazis or alt-right or whatever. And yeah, I know there are differences between all of them, but whoever you're describing, yeah, they do exist, all these people. They do describe to a particular ideology, and in some cases, not all but some, are ideologically driven to do dangerous or illegal things to upset the well-being of some other people who don't share their same genetics, let's say. Now, are there really so many of them in power that they constitute a threat? I say no, but Group A, of course, says yes. Likewise, are there some dangerous Jewish people in the world? Well, yes, there do exist some people who hold power in some industry like banking or the media or entertainment, sometimes wield that power to nefarious ends, and yes, some of these people have blood relatives who wear yarmulkes and light the menorah, and may even be tribalistic about that. Yeah, they do exist. Does the fact that they're Jewish have anything to do with any of that? Does the logic extend to the converse, that merely being Jewish means you're somehow doing or complicit in those bad things? I say no. Group B, it seems, says yes. When it comes to what Group A would have to say about Group B's boogeymen, or vice versa, well, I notice both of them may say the same thing, which is, well, sure, I suppose there are some people like the ones they describe, but they're nowhere nearly as numerous or bad as they make them out to be, because the enemies we're fighting are the real threat. In fact, our enemies made up a lot of scare stories about that other group's enemies. So again, that's one thing you'll hear, but in any case, that's not an argument. So we have these two extremist groups here, Group A and Group B, who are each convinced that their enemy of choice is in power in some way or another, and is more or less the source of most of the misery of the world. I mean, that in and of itself is something I find amusing. Both of these groups are convinced that they're on the currently losing side. And, you know, we see this in political extremists too, on the left and the right. They're both convinced that they're on the losing side. And the other side is in power. Amusingly enough, far leftists seem to believe that people to the right of them are Nazis, and far right-wingers seem to believe people on the left of them are all communists and or Zionists or controlled by the Jews in some way. But as usual, I would say both of these accusations are wrong. In any case, Group A and Group B have each dedicated themselves to fighting their enemy of choice. Okay, now speaking as a Satanist, it would seem to me that if you have an enemy, you would want to see that enemy defeated. So I would think it would follow that if you want to know your enemy and put some kind of plan together to destroy their power and enact vengeance on people who've harmed you, thereby maximize your own happiness and well-being in the long term. All right. Here's the question. Is either accusatory group really doing this? One group says their enemy is the collective known as the fascists. The other says their enemy is the collective group they call the Jews. So, with these two respective battles declared on Satanists and on other people, how do each of them approach it? Well, this is where I see the paranoia kicking in. But before we dive deeper into that, we're going to take a break. Stay tuned. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
Handmade, all-natural, botanical perfumes, soaps, and ceremonial incense, sculptures and jewelry to adorn yourself and your other altars. All this and more await you at moonandsunemporium.com. Ritual perfumes and other occult fine art luxuries, created and curated by me, Priestess Sarah Josephine Clark, with tarot readings by Reverend Dr. Dylan Clark. moonandsunemporium.com.
The Naked Satanist, with your host, Reverend Jeff Ivins. where I strip down Satanism to its raw form. Find the podcast where you get your podcasts from, or by visiting nakedsatanist.com. Hail Satan.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Visit the main website for the show at satansplain.com. There you can find every Satansplain episode. You can also listen to Satansplain on Spotify, YouTube, Audible, and a host of other places. If you are on social media, please give Satansplain a like and a follow, whatever the equivalent is on Facebook, on X, and on YouTube. Likewise, if you're listening now on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like button for this episode. For all questions and correspondence, email me directly. The address is bill@satansplain.com. If you enjoy Satansplain and would like to support the show, please go to the show's page on Locals. Point your web browsers to satansplain.locals.com. You can sign up for Locals for free, but you can also additionally become a paid subscriber there. That is the best way you can support the show. Additionally, we also have a merch store. You can go to the store.satansplain.com for that. And thank you, as always, to all of you who support Satansplain in one way or another. Before the break, I talked about these two particular extremes we see who like to stop by and harass Satanists. Group A, who calls us Nazis, and Group B, who calls us Jews. And I said that, speaking as a Satanist, it would seem to me that if you have some sworn enemy whom you think is making your life bad, then I would think that you want that enemy defeated. Therefore, it would reasonably follow, at least to me, that you'd want to try to know your enemy, and you'd want to have some kind of strategy to destroy that enemy, or at least destroy their power, or find some way you can change your life so that they don't have all that power over you. But honestly, do we see either of these reactionary groups doing that? Do we see groups A or B doing that? Well, in my observation, the answer is no. Now let's take Group A, for example. The ones who accuse the Church of Satan of being Nazis or fascists. This is just part of their overall feeling that there are Nazis out there in the world and they have to be stopped. Okay. Are they making any efforts to find real neo-Nazis and stop them, like learning where their meeting places are, or offering to guard Jewish synagogues or NAACP offices from skinheads who would vandalize them? Are they showing up online where people are posting racist or anti-Semitic stuff and saying, no, what this Holocaust denier said is completely wrong. Here, read this. Here's how we know the gas chambers were real, and da-da-da-da. Okay, are they taking the time to read books by prominent neo-Nazis to learn what their enemy believes versus what are misconceptions? Are they doing any sorts of things to defeat the world's neo-Nazis? Yeah, maybe some are, but for the most part, I don't see that. Instead, I just see a lot of people finding new justifications for calling more and more people Nazis, or calling more and more people fascists. They spend time trying to dox and harass people because they don't vote the same way, or they find new things to be offended about. I remember when Larry Elder, who was a conservative, black political commentator, was called by the LA Times, quote, the blackface of white supremacy. I mean, how absurd can you get? In fact, I remember one particular disgruntled ex-member of the Church of Satan, a fellow named Lamar Gabriel, who accused me of being a Nazi sympathizer. And his evidence for this, I kid you not, was because there was this book of essays that was published by a guy who eventually became a neo-Nazi, and somebody wrote an objective but overall favorable book review of the book back in 1994, I think it was. And the guy who wrote the book review is a friend of mine. And that was his argument. Yeah, that was his argument. That's the sort of logic their mind operates on. I call it the 6 degrees of Hitler game. If they can connect you, somehow you did this, so you believe this person, you hung out with that person believed that, and that person believed that, and oh, that person's a neo-Nazi. therefore you are too. It doesn't matter if you point out that you have friends who are gay or black or even a wife who is of a different race. No. You're friends with the guy who wrote a book review of a book whose author later became a neo-Nazi. Therefore, you're guilty by association. The end. And in fact, by trying to say that you have black friends and so on, well, if you say that, that's a microaggression that racists used, and therefore you're racist by trying to say it. Don't you know? You can't win with people who throw logic out the window, as I said in the disclaimer. Now, likewise, it's all the same underlying mentality with Group B. Group B says, Jews are at the root of every problem. Really? Wow, okay, that sounds serious. Well, let's assume you're correct about this. Let's pretend you recruited me to your way of thinking, and that I believe you. Okay. What's next? What's the plan? I think Jews speak a language called Hebrew to each other, so maybe we should learn that language. Maybe read books by prominent Jewish scholars. Get some direct evidence to learn more about this enemy. No? What's that? We're not going to do any of that? We'll get cooties or something? All right, well, what if we watch videos by them to learn what they really believe so we can learn to discard the stuff that are just rumors and stereotypes that, may be funny for some offensive memes, but aren't actually helpful in knowing this Jewish enemy you speak of because, the misinformation's misleading. Like the bogus stuff in the movie Yentl, we should discard the... No? We're just going to ditch studying or critical thinking and just accept whatever bad stuff people say about Jews secondhand? Okay. Well, I have a Jewish dentist, and is he causing some problem I should know about? Should I be concerned he's going to put some kind of microchip in my crown? Maybe, you say? Okay. Well, I don't see what benefit he would get from that personally. Or it doesn't matter. I should just hate him for being Jewish? Okay. I don't see how that gets us anywhere. Well, what about the Jews you say are causing problems? You said something about the Rothschild family. I guess they've been rich for a long time. Who are they again? I think Group A actually hates them for being capitalists with the generational wealth, which makes this battle awkward. But, well, never mind. You gave me some YouTube documentary making all these claims about the Rothschilds, and fine, I watched it. We'll assume it's all true and that they're bad people, okay? We have the evidence that they're bad, sure. Okay, what's the plan of action? Do we form businesses to compete with them? Do we help get legislation passed that inadvertently limits their power? No, we're just going to post internet memes and go troll threads on the internet about Israel, even though it looks like, again, Group A, that people already got a head start on that today. They're complaining about Israel and then posting free Palestine and stuff because Antifa hates Israel. Oh, wait, you didn't see that because they block all of, the fascists online. And you don't read anything anyway. Okay, then our plan, therefore, is to troll random people on the internet and call them Jewish. And if we say it with confidence, then maybe we can have the illusion we're right and make them cry or something. Once again, these people just seem to be pretty dense, and they act on impulse rather than any kind of strategy, nor applying any kind of critical thinking to learn about their supposed enemy. A Rothschild oligarch is put in the same class as comedian Mel Brooks and a Jewish orthodontist, and of course all Satanists as well, because I read somewhere that our founder, Anton LaVey, supposedly had some Jewish ethnicity. Likewise, it's a lot of the same with Group A and the claims that they throw at us, which is more of something I'll talk about in the next episode. But yeah, to many of them, it seems, a cashier at Chick-fil-A is essentially the same as a person who lives by Mein Kampf. And of course, we Satanists are somehow placed in that category as well. In both cases, I think it just goes to show that Satan is the ultimate scapegoat. So lots of people, even if they're not Christians, get a sanctimonious thrill linking Satanists to whomever or whatever they hate. Though I will add that sometimes these people from Group A are Group B do, strangely enough, identify as Satanists. Some of them were kicked out of the Church of Satan or lost an argument to a Church of Satan member on a message board somewhere, or are too solipsistic to understand that not every Satanist likes what they like or hates what they hate, or just have some weird compulsion for hating institutions and tell themselves that this is somehow being more individual, more satanic, by hating the Church of Satan and calling them left-wing or right-wing or whatever the boogeyman is. But, whatever the case, they play the same stupid game of trying to make the Church of Satan guilty by association. And again, pointing out facts to any of these people typically just goes in one ear and out the other. In this case of Group B, for example, Team Brown Shirt, it doesn't matter to them that I have no Jewish ethnicity and that as a Satanist, I in fact reject Judaism as a religion and the Hebrew scriptures just as much as I reject Christianity in the New Testament. You don't even have to take my word for it. You can pick up the Satanic Bible, compare that to the Old Testament or some Hebrew translation of that, and see that they are two wildly incompatible things. But again, it doesn't matter. That's too much work for some people. If you're not a Christian, then so far as they're concerned, you're with the devil anyway. Every week, one of these Group B assholes shows up on social media and accuses me of being an undercover Jew who adheres to the writings of the Jewish Talmud. Yes, they really do this. Now, that's what I call paranoia. Being so obsessed with a boogeyman that you see that boogeyman in everything. I mean, when I use the word anti-Semitic, I don't use that lightly. I'm not one of those people who throws the term anti-Semitic on anybody who just has a political disagreement about Israel or hates Barbra Streisand or things like that. But this is something else, of course. I mean, imagine being so irrationally anti-Semitic that you don't harass actual Jewish people and accuse them of being Satanists, but rather you harass actual Satanists and accuse them of being secret undercover Jews. You think that Jewish people are so bad that by making this alleged connection between Satanism and Judaism, you think that you've somehow smeared Satanism? It's not enough that we call ourselves Satanists in the Church of Satan and that we've explicitly and shamelessly taken on the Prince of Darkness as our mascot. No. These geniuses insist that we're hiding something because coming out as Jewish would mean worse PR or something. So yeah, it seems these people really are that stupid. By the way, you would think that since both of these people who show up online, the Group A people saying Satanists are Nazi, fascists, and the Group B people saying we're Zionist Jews, you would think they would debate each other. Like their paths would cross, and they would take some interest in showing why the other side is completely wrong in their view. But that doesn't happen. Unfortunately. I guess the Group A people just block the Group B people on social media, and the Group B people wouldn't read anything from Group A anyway, especially if it's longer than a paragraph. And one more side point. There are many people out there thinking, well, you Satanists do all the same things you're describing, Bill. You Satanists are people who are focused on an enemy and obsessed about them. Your enemy is Jesus, and your whole religion is based on the inversion and destruction of Christianity, so you think everything you don't like is Jesus, and your goal is to stop Christianity. To that I say, no, I don't, no, it isn't, no, I don't, no, it isn't. The reasons why we call our religion Satanism are all given at the start of every episode of Satansplain in the pre-recorded introduction. Satanism is not merely inverted Christianity, philosophically speaking, like I said. Satanism is just as anti-Islam, anti-Buddhism, or anti-Judaism as it is, for example, as it is anti-Christianity. You can see this even when it comes to satanic ritual, with the infernal names taken from mythologies all over the world, not just biblical ones. I did a 3-part episode on our book, The Satanic Scriptures, The Satanic Rituals. Satanic Scriptures is another book. Maybe I'll have to talk about that sometime. But yeah, I did a 3-part on the Satanic Rituals and how that shows you can take these other world mythologies and put them in a satanic context. One of those rituals, the Elektrische Vorspiele, even gets called anti-Semitic by Team A. We say Shem Hamfarash during ritual, which is a word that, according to occult lore, is forbidden in Judaism because it's using the secret name of God or some such nonsense. So we condemn Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and Jews in the Hymn of the Satanic Empire. So, as should be abundantly clear to anybody who does even a minimal amount of research on Satanism, Satanism condemns all spiritual religions, not just Christianity, and that does include the religion of Judaism as well. I want to finish the show by addressing some more of these accusations from the Team B crowd. The accusations are so profoundly dumb, this shouldn't take too long. Is the Church of Satan Jewish? Is the Church of Satan Zionist? Was its founder, Anton LaVey, a Jewish Zionist? Well, let's stop and see what these words actually mean. I know it hurts the poor little fragile brains of these compulsive anti-Semites to use some definitions and put some critical thought into things, but that's what I'm going to do. Let's start with the word Jewish. What does it mean for a person to be Jewish? Well, as far as I can tell, it means at least one of two different things. And the two different things can be mutually exclusive. Being Jewish can refer to something religious, or it can refer to something ethnic. And like I said, they can be mutually exclusive for a given person. You would think this is common knowledge that doesn't need to be explained, but apparently it does. First of all, there is the religion known as Judaism. It is the oldest of the three Abrahamic religions. Apparently, many Christians are unaware that their own Bible's Old Testament, which includes the Ten Commandments and things like that, is a translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, which is what believers of Judaism follow. Gee, how about that? The beliefs of Judaism are found in the first half of the Holy Bible, not anywhere in the Satanic Bible. People who followed Judaism, however, trace their traditions back to certain regions of the world, and they've also stuck to certain traditions of forming communities together and marrying other practitioners. The result of all of this is a Jewish ethnicity. So just as you hear Americans talk about their ethnicity by saying, I'm Irish American, my ancestors were from Ireland, or, oh, I'm Italian, oh, I'm Polish, and all of these other ethnicities you can determine with 23andMe tests or whatnot. Well, there does exist a Jewish ethnicity, shared heredity. So the bottom line is that when somebody says, hi, I'm Jewish, that can mean one of two things, or possibly both. They may be religiously Jewish, or they may be ethnically Jewish, or they may be both. It's possible you could have no Jewish ethnicity, but then religiously convert to Judaism. Or in the case of one of my friends, she was adopted by a Jewish family, so she grew up having the religion of Judaism, even if she wasn't ethnically Jewish at all. Or vice versa. You are descended, let's say, from an ethnically Jewish family who maybe even practiced Judaism in prior centuries, but you yourself, however, do not do that. You have some other entirely different religious beliefs instead. So that makes you ethnically Jewish, but not religiously Jewish. The American folk singer Bob Dylan, for example, is ethnically Jewish, but I read he became a Christian sometime in the 1970s. By the way, Jewish isn't the only term that shows up like this to describe both a religion and an ethnicity. Another example I know of is Armenian. There are ethnic Armenians who are people descended from those native to the Armenian highlands of West Asia, I believe. And there are religious Armenians who follow the Armenian Orthodox Church. So a person, again, could possibly be one or the other or both. There are people who marry into our Armenian family and convert to the Armenian church. Anyway, getting back to the question of whether a person can be both a Satanist and a Jew, well, it depends on what you mean. If by Jew you mean somebody whose religion is Judaism, then the answer is obviously no. Judaism is a monotheistic religion based on Hebrew scripture. Satanism is a non-theistic religion that symbolically considers oneself to be one's own god and explicitly rejects the commands from alleged deities like what's found in the Hebrew scriptures. Can a Satanist be ethnically Jewish? Sure. Just as a Satanist could be ethnically Irish or ethnically black or Chinese or Scandinavian or whatever. So what? Now, the rabid Team B anti-Semites like to pounce on this and say, I found a tweet saying that Satanists can be Jewish ethnically. You Satanists admitted that you have Jews among you. But once again, so what? This proves nothing. As I showed in the example of Bob Dylan, there are ethnic Jews to be found in Christianity as well. Does that mean Christians are all part of some Jewish cabal as well? These accusations make less and less sense the more you examine them. I don't care that Anton LaVey had an ethnically Jewish grandparent, because why the hell should I? It's irrelevant to the religion he formed, which is Satanism, which doesn't give you any special points based on what your genetic stock is or what religion of the world your great-great-great-grandparents happen to practice. Now, likewise with this term Zionism, there are at least two different meanings of this word that I've found. There is a sort of religious Jewish notion about being God's chosen people and having some sort of scriptural right to this people's land and so on. But there is also such a thing as secular Zionism. You can look this up and read about it on your own. But as far back as the late 1800s, there were some Jews who decided, hey, there are a lot of people out there who want to kill us for being Jewish, even if it's just for being ethnically Jewish. We see Jews fleeing different countries for that reason. So maybe we can get our own place going where it's safe to be Jewish, where we can survive and do all the normal things people do. So that, in a nutshell, is what secular Zionism is. Again, not based on anything scriptural, just based on what seems to be practicality. So can a Satanist be a Zionist? Well, obviously not in that first sense, in that religious sense, because, again, Satanists reject the religion of Judaism, and we don't care what the Hebrew Scriptures or the Old Testament says. But let's say you are a Satanist and you additionally happen to be of Jewish ethnicity, and you know that there are dangerous bigots out there in the world who want to see you executed precisely because of your ethnicity, especially in certain parts of the world. And you've come to the conclusion that what's in your own best rational self-interest to your survival is to be in a place where your ethnicity is protected. Well, philosophically, that makes sense to me. That doesn't mean that every Satanist of Jewish ethnicity is going to be feeling that same way, but I can at least see how it's possible. As I've said many times on Satansplain before, the Church of Satan has no single political position. We leave politics up to the individual members to decide for themselves, because what's in my best interest politically may not be in what's some other Church of Satan member's best interest politically. Thus, we don't all end up voting the same. So it's technically possible for a Satanist to politically be a secular Zionist, I suppose. And of course, once again, the screaming idiot anti-Semites of Team B see this and say, oh, see this proves everything. They just admit it. No. You're too profoundly stupid to understand how logic works. You are just stupidly drawing imaginary lines that connect two things you don't like, those two things being Satanists and your boogeyman, and making those connections to satisfy yourself and somehow declare victory. But with some of the time we have here, let's take a look at some of the specific arguments these people make against the Church of Satan and why they don't hold up. First of all, from this Team B, you get the really simple-minded arguments. They'll say, well, I read that Jews do all these horrific things like killing animals in a certain way for kosher meat and making circumcisions on babies with their teeth and controlling world banks. So, well, that all sounds satanic to me. Therefore, people who call themselves Satanists are Jews. Okay, arguments like this are, besides based on logic that just doesn't inherently work, it's based on the idea that, throwing the label of Satanism or satanic on anything, on any sort of thing they don't like, or going along with whatever propaganda they read in a Jack Chick tract, that by doing this, you can somehow make all these connections valid. And of course, if you point out where harming children is condemned in the 11 Satanic Rules of the Earth, or how page 89 of the Satanic Bible says we don't sacrifice animals or sacrifice babies. They don't care. They say, well, you're aligned with Satan, therefore you're a liar. Again, no winning with these people. My stock response to that accusation, though, is to say to the person, okay, your mother is not a whore. They don't know how to respond to that one. So another example is, well, the Jews control the world banks and everything else, and the Illuminati does that too, and the Illuminati are devil worshippers. Therefore, I can use the term Jew and Satanist interchangeably. Yeah, to quote the name of a Facebook group I'm fond of, once again, that isn't Satanism. So needless to say, if you're going to play games like this, then there is no hope for the debate or rational discourse. You're just showing up and being an asshole to Satanists. Honestly, most of the arguments I hear from these Team B idiots come down to this sort of stuff. But let's look at a couple of other arguments. Another accusation I keep seeing over and over again is, well, you Satanists follow the Jewish Talmud. The Talmud is the religious text of Satanism. I've seen some of these anti-Semites even dare me to condemn the Talmud. Or sometimes they'll see a post from the Church of Satan that points out abuse in the Catholic Church, or sharing a funny anti-Christian meme. And they'll say, well, I dare you to say something bad about the Jews. You only ever attack Christians. Again, I addressed some of this earlier in the episode, debunking the claim that Satanism is focused only on Christianity. It's not. If it seems Christianity is getting more than its share of the blame for religious nonsense, gee, maybe that's because they do the most harassing and proselytizing. At least in English-speaking countries. But let's get back to this thing, the Talmud. What is the Talmud? Well, it is certainly not part of Satanism's literature. Is the Talmud what the religion of Judaism follows, like how Christians follow the Holy Bible or the Muslims follow the Quran? Well, sort of. I didn't actually know fully myself, so I had to look this up. Judaism's beliefs ultimately come from the Hebrew Scriptures, which were retranslated to become the Old Testament of the Christian Bible. So the words that they think come from God are in the first 5 books of those Hebrew Scriptures or Old Testament. And stuff like other things in the Old Testament, like the Psalms and Proverbs, they come later. But in any case, you have all these laws in the book of Leviticus. You can eat this, but you can't eat that. You can wear this, but you can't wear that. You should do this to address this problem on this day of the week, and so on. But as I understand it, sometimes this leads to dilemmas because of the different ways to interpret Levitican law. And this is basically where the Talmud comes in. The Talmud is this huge multi-volume set of writings from different Jewish rabbis over the centuries and has all these details like, okay, here's how you prepare kosher meat. Here's what you do when this thing happens on the Sabbath, but you have to do this other thing. Here's where these 2 rules overlap and what you should do in this case. Here are all the details, what allegedly happened at the first Hanukkah, all, so on. Now, to claim that this book is a book that Satanists follow, it's just completely absurd. We don't care about Levitican law. That's because we don't care about the Bible, whether it's the Old or the New Testament. That is not our religion. We don't believe in God. We certainly don't believe we have to follow his set of rules. Expecting Satanists to follow the Jewish rule book is absurd as expecting people playing Monopoly to follow the rules of the game of chess. As I mentioned earlier, that there was a guy who dared me to condemn the Talmud. I said, okay, let me find an English translation online and skim through it. Let me find 10 examples of things said in the Talmud that I disagree with, and also show you where it conflicts with Satanism. And I'll give you the page number of the Satanic Bible and, the chapter, verse, book, whatever of the Talmud, to compare for a source. So I went ahead and I did that. It was pretty easy. Skimming through, okay, look, this part says serve Jehovah this way. Well, we don't believe in any gods. See these pages of the Satanic Bible. This other part of the Talmud talks about kosher laws. Well, we don't have any dietary restrictions. See this page about indulgence and this part of the Satanic Bible, and so on and so on. So again, it is so stupid that any Satanist would have to do this. But I did it anyway, to go through the effort. But why do these Group B anti-Semite types claim the Talmud is the book of Satanism? Well, they probably wouldn't want to say the Hebrew scriptures because that's the Old Testament and that's part of their Bible too. But have they read either the Talmud or the Satanic Bible? No, of course not. It seems all of their information on the Talmud comes from a meme. Yes, a meme, or in some cases, older sources that contributed to the meme, but almost always it seems to be a meme that gets passed around showing all these alleged quotes from the Talmud saying these horrific things. Some of the things in the meme go back to older Christian propaganda, like I said, like the elders of the Protocols of Zion, or Third Reich propaganda, or even older stuff from the Middle Ages. But in any case, you have these idiots believing in what they read off of a meme and not really caring or having the mental skills to check to see if any of it's true. Also, of course, to these idiots, anything that is horrific must be satanic, like I said. So therefore, it's a meme saying people are doing or believing in horrific things, then therefore it's Satanism. Once again, it also does not matter that the meme might claim the Talmud promotes rape or molestation, and we can point to our own Satanic Bible or other satanic literature for that matter and say, no, harming children is explicitly condemned in the 11 Satanic Rules of the Earth and on this page of the Satanic Bible. It's in one ear and out the other. You serve the Prince of Lies, so I don't trust what the Satanic Bible says. Okay, but you're going to believe a meme from the internet. Yeah, great. So not surprisingly, that list of horrific things in the Talmud in that meme are pretty much all fabricated or taken out of context. You can find lots of sites debunking it. And of course, you can read a copy of the Talmud yourself and see for yourself. But again, even if it were all true that the Talmud said these horrific things, it's not our religion and has nothing to do with us. And we can point to our own literature showing that we actually do believe in other stuff and we don't believe in the stuff you're accusing us of. Well, I have talked a lot. I think this is a good place to end part 1 of this look into the silly Nazi accusations and Zionist accusations we get. I'm going to begin in part 2 with another one of these absurdities we hear from the type B crowd, and then get into some essays on the Fascism Question. So that will be in the next episode. Until then, thank you for listening. Hail Satan.
You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at Satansplain.com. And for more information about Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode, copyright 2025, Magister Bill M.